Hello, and welcome to Cooking with Brooke. I am your host, Brooke Little, and as a burgeoning specialist in the music of Tudor-era England, for my project, I will be preparing and interpreting a recipe called Hippocras. That's right, Hippocras. Hippocras is a spiced wine with a long-standing history dating back to Roman times, but it was an especially popular beverage in 16th century England. It was popular for several reasons. First, water was especially undrinkable, with the public latrines placed atop the then London Bridge, and how the River Thames, the city's main source of water, was utilized not only as a public sewer system, but also as a means to wash clothes, dispose of old meats, and generally ridden with dysentery. Wines and Hippocras therefore became a drink of choice at Tudor tables. Next was the Tudor belief in the especially efficacious qualities of the drink. In addition to being consumed at court banqueting tables, the beverage was used to fortify women during childbirth. And finally, even children enjoyed this popular beverage to ensure that they too were being served its nutritiousness, as well as learning etiquette at table. I am using a recipe for Hippocras found in the Le Ménagier de Paris, prepared by Jérôme Pichon. It is a 19th century French cookbook which contains many transcriptions of earlier recipes, including Hippocras. I will also be utilizing the translation of the recipe found on this website, which also contains advice in how to execute the recipe in modern terms. The recipe calls for a bottle of red wine, preferably Burgundian, galangal powder, ground cinnamon, and ground ginger. Off to acquire my ingredients.
Okay, let's do this. Going inside to Whole Foods to find my ingredients for Hippocras. Here's my Wild West mask.
Don't have any galangal powder. Okay everyone, here are the ingredients I settled on. So I've chosen this red wine. It's a French wine, and for a Tudor Hippocras it would have been made from French wine, specifically that of Burgundy, but I don't think I could afford Burgundian wine at Whole Foods. There was an option in the time to have an English wine, but more than likely at court, where this would have been served, they would have been using a red wine. I've got cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. As we saw at Whole Foods, galangal powder was not readily available, so an appropriate substitute for the galangal powder would be just to add more ginger, but having double the amount of ginger would probably make it taste not great, so I've decided to go with half of the amount of galangal powder that they suggest and just a little bit of cloves. The recipe I'm using, I'm going to be assuming that it's New World, so a little bit later of a recipe after the spice trade was readily available. And having these kind of spices in a drink was a reflection of one's wealth and power. I'm also going to be using cane sugar instead of powdered sugar. The cane sugar, again, is a product of the New World, coming from sugar cane. In the 16th century, sugar was actually one of the leading causes of death, as people got addicted to it. It caused a significant amount of dental disease, and people lost their teeth, or their teeth became infected and they died. Elizabeth I actually lost all her teeth and was fortunate enough to have replacement with wooden teeth. But we'll be using cane sugar for this recipe. Going to start by placing half a cup of cane sugar into my bowl. Now I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon powder. Y'all, I'm really nailing it today, and I just added 1.5 teaspoons of cloves. So now I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. Now I'm going to be adding 1.5 teaspoons of ginger. And again, I've decided to substitute cloves for the galangal powder because if I added double the portion of ginger, the ginger would just overpower the recipe. So here's ginger. Adding half a teaspoon at a time to get 1.5 teaspoons. Going to go ahead and whisk together the spices and the sugar. This ginger is a little bit clumpy, but I think it's going to be okay. Last but not least, I'm going to add this entire bottle of French wine. I'm so sick. Oh, shit. And I'll go ahead and whisk this together. Whisk all that together. And what it's going to do now is it's just going to sit soaking up all those spices and the sugar for 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and cover it with this plastic wrap. And it's just gonna sit for 2 hours. Okay, here we are 2 hours later, and I'm going to strain the mixture through this device right here. The modern transcription called for cheesecloths, but I could not find cheesecloths, so I found this contraption, and we'll see how it works. Last pass through in the sieve. We'll see what I'm able to do just to get out any final dregs, which are the remnants of the spices. Oh gosh, so sick. Ugh. And here I am about to try the final product of today's cooking episode of Hippocras. Cheers. Oh my God. Ugh. In closing, I would like to comment on the work interpretation played into my final product. The multiple choices I made possibly drastically altered the final drink. Had I have chosen a different vintage, what impact would that have played? If I had used dusting sugar, as many Tudor recipes would have called for, how would that have altered the taste? Let's say I had taken the time to transcribe the paleography from a 16th century cooking manuscript. All in all, I have to say that for me personally, no matter the choice, no matter the interpretation, the taste would have been less than ideal. But then again, who am I to argue with the taste of Tudor kings and queens? Thank you for tuning in, and here's to